Oh, I'll just back up a little bit.
There.
Oh, thank you.
There you go. Okay.
Calling us to order at 1 o'clock. Acknowledgement of land. Trustee Yegas, please. Can you please use your mic?
Okay. Welcome to our division office located on the traditional land and territory of the Niitsitapi, Piikani, Kainai, and Siksika, the Blackfoot people within the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta.
Thank you. Moving on to our consent agenda. Can I get somebody to make a motion to, for the consent agenda to be approved? Greg? Mr. Trustee Long, sorry. I'll get used to that. Are there any emergent changes to the agenda? Seeing none, can I get someone to make an motion to present? For no, I guess I don't have to since we didn't have any. Yeah, all in favor. Thank you. Passed. Any declaration of conflict of interest? Seeing none. Moving on to our superintendent report.
Great, thanks. I'll just take a couple of minutes to give you some of the highlights for the past month. One of the things that tops the list is certainly the opportunity that we have as senior leadership and the board to go out and to visit with staff in our schools and to be able to have our trustees visit all of the schools over the 4 years that they are in the term of their office as a trustee, and to get into all those schools and to talk with staff about the great things that they see happening in their school and some of the challenges that they might have. And so this past month, we were able to go and visit with Matthew Halton High School. And while we were there, we were also able to tour the bus shop, which is right behind Matthew Halton. And we had a great visit there with our new mechanic and got to see the shop there. He even showed off a little bit and showed us the whole big, what was that, a 60-passenger bus, Jeff, maybe? 72? Yeah, all lifted up off the ground so that he could get under and work on it there, and to learn about the work that he's doing for our school division in certifying buses and keeping them repaired and in good operating shape was a good visit. Certainly one of the highlights of that day for sure. We also had a meeting of the whole at the end of January. We had our two facilitators come back, David George and Cal Hauserman, and they came back and just discussed the feedback that was provided around the school division vision, mission, and values, the draft that we had put out there. And 333 responses came back, and we had lots of good discussion, and I know that more information will be coming up to a public board meeting in the future, perhaps even in March. So we're just still gathering some of that information and collating it and looking forward to future discussion with the board in the future. One of the goals that the board had asked me to accomplish this year was to make sure that our administrative procedures are up to date with the changes in the Education Act. And so I'm happy to report that our Admin Procedure Working Committee met soon after the new year. They have gone through all of the 500s, all of the 400s, and half of the 300s. So we're making great progress. We have actually another date for that committee lined up for this coming Thursday. And the plan is to go through, of course, the remainder, the 100s, 200s, and the remainder of the 300s. Even though I say that we've been through them all, as you can imagine, getting a group of administrators together and having them go through the admin procedures, looking for changes that should be reflected because of the changes in the Education Act. They're picking up on a few other things along the way, and so that's kind of slowed down the process a bit, but we're on track to have this completed for this school year. And any significant changes that we would go through our normal process, and that's to make sure that those changes are presented to school councils and to school staff, and that they would be given an opportunity for input and feedback before we finalize them and put them on the website. The more minor changes, simply changing School Act to Education Act and updating the references, those sorts of minor changes we wouldn't bring through that process. It's more of an administrative matter, and so we would just make those changes and post them. But where the content or the intent of the administrative procedure is changed significantly, then we would go through that normal process. So that's just information for you there. Jumping down a little bit to the school visits, I was able to attend the J.T. Foster and West Meadow Elementary School staff meetings, and that's always a great opportunity for me as I'm observing new administrators in their leadership roles and get a chance to visit with the staff there too. I also was able to attend the W8 Day School Council meeting, and very happy to report they've got a great, active, fun, and energetic parent council there, and lots of great discussion occurred there. I am looking forward in the next month to be able to get out to CCHS and Grantham School as well to attend their staff meetings. I did attach an article. This is the Eye on Education article. This is the worst day ever, with a question mark. So if you haven't read that, I'd encourage you to do so. It's an amazing poem. That was the highlight of this article from a grade 11 student when she was given an assignment. And it really talks about perspective. And so if you read the poem one way, it sounds like it's a terrible day. But when you read it from the bottom up, which is really what the student felt about the day, you can see that she believes that there's no such thing as a bad day. It's really about your perspective. And so anyway, if you haven't had a chance, I'd encourage you to read that. It's an amazing thing, and I don't know that I could ever write something like that. She's very talented. So with that, I'll maybe close the report and just ask if there are any other questions.
Guess you're going to get off scot-free. I just would also like to reiterate, though, how important it is that as trustees, it's really great to be able to get out to our schools and have breakfast with the board and the staff, and I really appreciate them taking time out of their morning to join us. Thank you. All right, moving on to our action items. E1, 2020-21 school calendar. Recommendation that the Board of Trustees approve the 2020-21 school year calendar as presented or amended. Can I get someone to make that motion? Mr. Burdette? And we'll turn it over to Mr. Seguin to present it.
All right. Yes, as you know from past years, what we've done the last few rounds is we've approved the current year and then left the second year in draft, just to make sure that nothing changes in regards to provincial achievement tests, the dates that are scheduled there, or diploma exams. And so the calendar that I present to you today does have a couple of modifications from the one that Mr. Sampson brought to you, thinking was it last year around this time? And I'll just highlight those here for you. So we had February, on the version that he brought you, the February days, the February 16th and 17th, where typically we had them as days in lieu of parent-teacher interviews, were changed to board holidays last year. And so this change that comes before you today is to revert back to days in lieu for those 2 days. And so schools, parents, teachers get together on a few evenings, I guess probably 4 throughout the school year, and then in return for that, there's days in lieu granted that correspond with the Teachers' Convention week. And that's typically how we had done it in the past. We moved away from it, but we're suggesting to the board that we consider going back to that in this calendar. Also, you'll notice on August 24th, that is an additional day at the front end, which was different from the version that Mr. Sampson brought you last year. And the reason for that is that would be only for new teachers and administrators to Livingston Range. So every year we have a little bit of changeover and we hold an orientation day. And so that day is placed in there. Really, the expectation would be that the only people that have to attend on those days would be, or on that day, would be the new teachers and administrators. It works into our operational calendar. The last item for consideration is June 28th. So in the version that Mr. Sampson brought you, it showed that teachers and staff ended on June 25th. However, there is a Science 30 exam on June 28th. And so even though in our school division we don't have a lot of students writing Science 30, there may be a situation where a student would need to write. And so we need to make that an operational day. Again, the expectation there would really be that the only people that would be necessarily having to come to work on that day would be if you were assigned to supervise the Science 30 exam. Now, I should just mention to you that I have a draft prepared. If the board approves of the calendar, that I would send out a message to our principals that they would then relay to the staff. And basically, it would be that the changes here, August 24th and June 28th, only those teachers that would be assigned to attend on those days would be required to, just to make that clear. Are there any questions about the calendar as it's presented? It is within the 200 days that we have within the Education Act that we can have as operational days. Student days are we've always been around that 182, 183, sometimes 184 in the last several years. And anyway, it falls in line with the Education Act, and I believe it also is designed so that we are assured that we get the required hours of instruction from that Alberta Education sets out for us as well.
Any questions? Trustee Poitras?
I just want to say, I think it's such a good idea to send out that memo to the teachers, just to make it clear that we're not adding any extra time, but just that these days are for those who will need new instructions as admin or in case of that science. So I think that's a great idea and very proactive.
Yeah, I think the communication is important. I think, you know, the reality is many teachers will be in prior to the school officially starting anyway, and they have that first kickoff of their staff meeting. And the fact is, after the last operational day, many teachers are still in and cleaning up and putting away those last minute things. So, but this that will make it clear that the requirements for this year would be only those that would be assigned would be required to be there. Okay.
Any other questions? I'd also like to say that I appreciate the August 24th day for our new teachers to be able to come in and are they going to be joined together all in one place with their administrators and just or do they go individually to each school?
So no, typically what we've done is we've called them together. Sometimes it is a little bit earlier in August. Last year we had it on the very first operational day that we were back. And some of the feedback from those new teachers was that they just felt torn. They knew they had to be here and they wanted to be here to learn more about the jurisdiction, but they felt like they were missing out on connecting and starting the school year with their staff in their school. And so even though we had provided instructions to our administrators last year not to schedule a staff meeting on that first day, that they should schedule it for at least the second day that they're back, there's still that feeling like everybody's back in the school and I'm here. So we just felt like this would be a better way to meet the needs of everyone. But they would all come here to the division office. And for any new administrators, they would join. We're usually together for our typical format has been we're together for the better part of the morning, and then in the afternoon they break off. And so in the afternoon, the administrators would go one direction with Jeff and I, talk more about the budgeting, the business side of things, certain administrative procedures that pertain more to administrators, while the teachers would go and do something like reviewing the teacher growth supervision evaluation process and answering any questions that they have that are critical and outstanding, just to set their minds at ease before the school year begins.
Thank you. All in favor? Approved. Thank you. Moving on to E2, board policies. Recommendation that the Board of Trustees approve the changes to Board Policy 3 and Board Policy 8 as presented or amended. Can I get someone to make that motion? Trustee Yegus? And I'll turn it over to Trustee Yegus and Trustee Toon to lead us through it, please. And pause.
If you look at the, on the top of the role of the board, our primary purpose on this is was to change the preamble. And because we had to include the natural person's power as established by the Education Act, so what we did is we just included that within the preamble of the role of the board. There's going to have to be other changes in terms of the specific areas of responsibility, but we'll have to be doing that at another time. So at this point right now, we're only asking the approval of the preamble to the role of Policy 3, role of the board. Are there any questions on that? Another policy, the next policy that we did was the policy on board operations. One of the things we did on board operations is that we had to do some changes according to the Education Act. So if you, we also decided to do some changes, some structural changes to this policy. So if you look at it, our first one is that we set up the board structure with the elections and a brief history of the board structure, the type of the structure itself and who's where, like, you know, the trustees in each ward. Do you want to just keep going down? Thank you. And any revisions we put in there, how the revisions can be made, and this is all according to the Education Act. The second part of this that we did was on meetings, and we just did a few changes to the meeting. And well, one thing, we have to now do it if after a municipal election, the meeting has to be held within 4 weeks. Okay. The next one is we looked at the different types of meetings we have: regular meetings, special meetings, in-camera sessions. Then we looked at, but number 3 was participation by electronic means. Number 4, the agenda, and we talked about how to put things on an agenda and what the agenda includes. And there's also an appendix for that. 4.2 is the minutes. Okay. And 4.3 are motions and how you do a motion. 5 was the information on delegation to board meetings. There was no changes on this one. 6 was the board member honorarium benefits and expenses, and this was approved at the September meeting, and it's all included with an appendix. So we're asking the board to approve this as changed. There's been a lot of, as I said, maybe structural changes to this. Those were the 2 ones we spent a lot of time working on. We have other ones we're going to be working on, and we have a meeting set up later on in February where we're going to talk about the role of the board and the role of the superintendent, because we have to make all of our policies aligned to the Education Act and the other acts that come in after the regulations. So unless somebody else on the board, on the committee, John or Brad or or Lori also sits on it as,
I just want to say that those dark blue that's in our policies are now hyperlinks that they can click on, which takes them to the board policy regulations. So that's something new that we also added so that you can go and look at where exactly they are in the Ed Act. And as much as they are doing their admin procedures, we are doing our board procedures and hopefully getting them all aligned and moving forward with the Ed Act that's finally now approved. Trustee Poitras?
Reading through this made me wish that this had been done right when I came in as a board trustee. I really appreciate you guys doing this and making it very clear and having it set out in such a way that when we do get brand new trustees, or even trustees, when I went through and reread it now that it's redone, brings a lot of clarity and makes a lot more sense. And I really appreciate that. I think it will be very beneficial going forward for all trustees.
thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. All in favor? Passed. Moving on to E3, professional learning. Recommendation that the Board of Trustees approve the following trustees to attend the following professional development. Trustee McKee, PD session at the Alberta Teachers Convention, keynote speaker on February 20th. Trustee Burdette, PD session at National Congress on Rural Education, March 29th to 31st. Trustees Hodges, Poitras, and Burdette, PD session, Alberta School Council's Conference, April 24th to 26th. Trustee Hodges, Poitras, Burdette, Toon, Long, Yegas, and McKee, PD session, ASBA, SGM, June 1st to 2nd in Red Deer. Can I get someone to make that motion? Trustee Poitras? Any questions? Trustee Toon?
Just a point of clarification. Typically, SGM wasn't included with the professional development because it's encompassed in our policy. Is that a change or?
No, I just continued reading and recognized it when I was halfway through reading it. Our ASBA is an automatic update. We just had the discussion, and as I was reading through it, I already had gone through it. So just for clarification, we don't need that one permission to go to, but all the above ones we do. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. For your information only. Any other questions? All in favor? Thank you. Passed. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Oh, there it is. E4, our voting procedures. Recommendation that the Board of Trustees change the voting procedures for position of board chair, board vice chair, committee members, and committee chair. Votes will no longer be cast by secret ballot instead of show of hands. Can I get someone to make that motion? Trustee Long? Did you want to speak to that, Trustee Long? Just pull it towards you. There you go.
Got it. I think by passing this motion, we will create more board transparency within the board itself. It'll give us an opportunity to further discussion, questioning, and opinion sharing, which will clarify to those people that are running and the people that are voting, keep us more in line with what we're thinking. And if there would have been any misunderstandings, this way there won't be.
Any questions? Trustee Poitras? Oh, Trustee Yegas?
First of all, for the position of chair and vice chair, I think this will result in a lot of feelings that are, that we could hurt, that are not good for each other. I think when you're voting for somebody, especially for chair and vice chair, if there's two or more people running, I don't know if I really want to know who votes for me. I think by having a secret ballot, you're voting for that person and nobody needs to know. The other thing I look at is that if you get a new board members coming on, they don't know who the people are. They don't really, some of them don't even know how the board works. And what you're doing is there's an influencer. I mean, we all know the psychological part of how we follow the group. So you look at somebody who you know next to you, like if they're running in the same ward as you do or you voted, and however they're voting, because you have no idea what's going on, you'll vote with them. So I think that there's that issue with it too. And the other thing I really have a problem in terms of the psychology part of it is that whether you like it or not, I think our feelings do get hurt. I mean, this is just human nature that it happens. I mean, we get over it and everything else. But if you're, if you don't know who voted for you, then, as I said, it's easier to get over than if you do know who somebody did vote for you. Okay, thank you.
Trustee Poitras?
I agree with what Clara said. I've never had my feelings hurt by someone not voting for me because I don't know who did or didn't vote for me. Just on clarification, so if you had 3 people running for chair, then would you go through and say, all in favor of this person, all in favor of that person, all in favor of this person, and just say that you can only vote once? Or I'm just wondering how that would look. And then are you going to have each person speak to their vote? Like, I'm voting in favor of Lacey because she has the best hair. Just a clarification.
Trustee Long?
No, I think I'll answer to both. Lacey first. You wouldn't be explaining why you voted afterwards. You would be speaking regarding the people running beforehand. And to Trustee Yegas, one of the things, and it's extremely important that we need to learn to feel, is not to take things personally. And so basically what we're doing then, if we follow that food of thought, is that we're running away from actually being the kind of people we need to be.
Trustee Burdette?
Yeah, I think I catch the spirit by which Trustee Long is bringing this forward. And I think I agree with the part where maybe we could have, I remember a time when we used to have nominators, and the nominators told people why they nominated us. We've gone away from that, and so we just put our own hand up and we say, we want to run. And then we tell them why we want to run, and then we vote. I think having more discussion around why we think we're qualified and why somebody else may think we're qualified is a good thing, but I still think that the vote should be secret. That's what I think. So I wouldn't support this the way it is, but I might support it if it was talking more to the process leading up to the vote and how we get there.
Trustee Yegas?
A couple of years ago, we talked about and we put into our policy also that we were going to have a meeting of the whole prior to our committee, our board meeting, our organizational meeting. And the whole point of that, which we had long discussions on, was that we would ask people who wanted to run, and then we could look at them and they could give some of their reasons, not that we take away from giving their reasons after, so that people would have a time to vote on this. And I think this is maybe one of the ways that we can still do that. We really haven't done that. By the way, I'm only talking about here about the board chair and the vice chair. For the committee members, in that, I think we do need to change the way we have to put some tweaks on the way we select the committee members. I mean, I think it's becoming a little cumbersome right now, and there has to be some tweaks. But for the board chair and the vice chair, I think there's other ways that we could look at this rather than by voting for a show of hands.
Trustee McKee?
Well, after hearing what's been said, can I make an amendment to the motion that the words, the board chair and board vice chair be removed from the motion?
That be a friendly amendment?
I think that really takes everything away
Yeah.
from the motion. We might as well not even have a motion if we're going to remove that. I think at this point, it's, as I said, the other two are just sort of meaningless.
I think we
Besides,
can,
policy does say committee chair is selected by the committee. We don't do that as a board.
I think we can vote on this the way it stands, and if you wanted to make a different motion, John, you could, but I think for right now, we will just leave the recommendation the way it is and we'll vote on it. Any other questions, comments? Trustee Toon? Oh. Oh, we can't just, okay, sorry.
Shut it down.
Okay. We can't do. All right, so trustee McKee put forth a motion to strike out board chair and vice chair out of the recommendation. Can do you want to speak to that? Trustee McKee, do you want to speak to your recommended change?
No, that's fine.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Mr. Toon?
I'd
Trustee Toon?
be willing to speak to the amended motion. I feel that there is some validity in having a motion that includes committee members. It might not be as encompassing as hearing what people say. We need more discussion that could be added to it after this amendment is approved, but I'd be in favor of the amendment because it is a step forward in the right direction to achieving what I hear fellow board members say is that we need some tweaks and changes to the process that we do some of our board work.
Any other questions or comments? So we're voting on the amended changes that would read the Board of Trustees change the voting procedures for positions of committee members and committee chair. Votes will no longer be cast by secret ballot instead of show of hands. That's what we're voting on right now. Trustee Toon?
I propose an amendment to the amendment that we strike out committee chair, as Trustee Yeager said, because typically that's picked by the committees themselves. That's not something we do as a whole board because it takes some discussion once a board committee meets, knowing what everyone's schedule and commitment is. So I would exclude that from the motion.
Can I ask if that'll be a friendly amendment, though, to the mover?
You can ask that.
Trustee McKee, would you consider that a friendly amendment? Removing committee chair out of there? Can you move it forward? Pull it towards you, the whole machine? Because it needs to be moved forward.
Yes, I would.
All right, everybody, so we're now voting on the friendly amendment that now reads that the Board of Trustees change the voting procedure for positions of committee members and, committee members. Votes will no longer be cast by secret ballot instead of show of hands. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Passed. Just like, now I go back to the main motion.
Lori, I do just have a question for
Yeah.
clarification. So some committees have 3 members, some committees have 2 members. How does that work when you have 2 members and you're voting by the show of hands?
Trustee Toon?
I could speak to that. I was speaking with another trustee that they use this system and they just go alphabetically down the board members list and they ask all those in favor of trustee by the number of people who've put their hands and you vote accordingly. So you'd still, if you had two members you were voting for, you'd still get 2 votes. It wouldn't preclude, as Trustee Poitras says, you only get 1 vote. But if there's 2 positions, you can still vote for those 2 people. In saying that, maybe we should add some language to the motion. I don't know how to clarify that, because in case we're not all in the room when the vote happens.
So just a question of clarity for myself, sorry, before I move on here. Is that something that needs to be put, the language needs to be put in there, or is that something that we can sit down as a board and write it up in our policy? Trustee Yegus?
I think if we have this motion, we have to change policy, and I think within the policy, we could look at the procedures for doing this, of how you're going to do this, because I think this will need some discussion as a board or that, you know, at a meeting to how we're going to do this. But right now, all we're doing is we're changing policy.
So now I go back to the main motion, which has been amended. Okay. The recommendation that the Board of Trustees change the voting procedure for position of committee members. Votes will no longer be cast by secret ballot instead of show of hands. All in favor? Oh. Yeah, well, unless there's more questions, sorry. Was there any other questions before I close the? Did you want to close, Trustee Long? Nope. All right, no other yep.
Change my mind. Yeah, I was open to both the suggestions by Trustee Burdette and Trustee Yegus. My reason for this was so that we would have much more discussion than we have had in the last 2 years. It's been a long, like what Trustee Burdette had to say is somebody wants to run for a position and they basically give a 15-second, 20-second reason why they want the position and we vote. And I didn't think there was enough. That wasn't enough questioning or discussion or reasoning before we voted. And that was the purpose of me bringing this in, so.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Poitras.
Sorry, I just need to clarify. When we're talking about committees, didn't we get put on committees by sticky note last time? Sorry.
And then we brought it to the board and we did a motion for each
Okay,
thing, so.
okay.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Passed.
That was fun.
On to E5, stakeholder input. It's the recommendation that the Board of Trustees request the superintendent to draft a plan as to how to engage stakeholders in sharing place-based priorities in regards to the 2020-2021 budget, and it be submitted to the board approval at the next regular board meeting, March 11th, 2020. The Board of Trustees also approved to allow time to gain feedback on a draft budget prior to it being presented to the board for approval. Can I get someone to make that motion? Trustee Toon? Myself and Trustee Toon put this motion forward. I feel at this time, as you can see in the preamble, that it is very important to engage our stakeholders, our staff, our communities, to help with and understand our fiscal responsibilities moving forward with our new budget. We are not going to have any more money than what the government's allotting for the next possibly 4 years. And I think that them understanding that and how we are going to prioritize what we do in Livingston Range is really important for them to understand, to help us move forward and supporting Livingston Range in the future. Anybody have any questions, comments? Trustee McKee?
Okay,
You're
no,
good.
you're good to go. There's a couple things here. The main emphasis of the stakeholder input, I certainly do not disagree with that. I think it's always a good thing to have stakeholder input. The budget itself is it's a document that's probably 40 to 50 pages long, and it's very complex. And when you do a budget, there's a lot of information that you have to, well, not decipher, but you have to, take in place what numbers are for certain lines in your budget, and you have to be analytical on what it all means in the end. So with that in mind, when you say like you want to hear from parents, students, and staff, I mean, I think that's a good thing. The complexity of the budget may be somewhat overwhelming for some people in the detail that which it involves. So my thoughts on it are, Mr. Seguin has to develop a draft plan to engage the stakeholders, and I am curious in exactly the depth that will be put into place when it comes to the draft budget. I guess that's probably my thoughts on the draft budget itself, like how complex is this engagement going to be with regards to the overall budget?
Thank you. Trustee Toon?
Thank you. I appreciate the comments. I know it's critical for us to get that stakeholder input as we're doing this, as we're embarking on a completely new funding framework and different economic times than we faced in a lot of years in this province. I don't have a concern about the complexities of the budget. Our administration does an amazing job at making it so a farmer can understand it when it comes to this table. So something like a budget summary, it wouldn't be something that's taking the entire budget line by line out to parents and staff and students. It would be an overarching concept, so we don't get our packet a week before or however long the meeting and then come here and make a decision in an isolated bubble. We want to take this out to stakeholders so we can say, well, we've been to school councils, we've talked with people and surveys or whatever the recommendation from administration is, because they have the expertise of developing the budget and they do a phenomenal job. And we're in a really unique circumstance in a lot of jurisdictions in our area with the fiscal conservative nature that they've planned for. We do a phenomenal job, and we have great, amazing staff. So I appreciate their work, and I know that they can develop something and present it to us at the next board meeting, a plan. This doesn't mean that we approve the plan or not. It's bringing a plan to us that we can say, yep, this meets our needs of stakeholder engagement and gives us something proud we can share with our stakeholders. Because I know a lot of people, you look around, and that's the talk is education and health right now in the province, and people are worried about what's going to happen with both those things, and we need to alleviate some of that stress of not knowing, because the uninformed people can perpetuate messaging that isn't in line with what our values are at Livingston Range.
Trustee Yegas?
I totally agree with what Trustee Toon said. I think one of the things with changes that are coming out, especially with the funding formula and with the next budget, is that the stakeholders have to understand I guess, the restrictions that we're being placed under. And one of the things this motion does say, it says in sharing place-based priorities. It doesn't say we're going to give them the budget and tell them, tell us what you think about it. I mean, it is very specific. Well, I shouldn't say specific, it's general, but, it talks about priorities. I think it's a great idea because I think we really need to get back to our public in terms of letting them understand that we have just X amount of money and we can't do everything. It'd be really nice.
Thank you. Trustee Long?
Yeah, considering what Brad has to say and Trustee McKee as well, Trustee Toon, I know how much trouble I had with understanding a lot of what Mr. Perry had to say for at least the first 16 months. So I think this would have to be in a lot of it in a literate/written format rather than in numerical format like an accountant would do in order for the stakeholders to understand it.
Thank you. Trustee Burdette?
I guess, yeah, I think that we need to let people know where we sit when it comes to our budgets, because budgets are hard to do when money is limited. A little concern I have, though, is, well, and I guess we're asking for a recommendation so they can tell us if it's going to stretch the time. I know that we're a lot of times, our finance department is right up against the wire for even getting us the budget, let alone trying to fit some time in there to let everybody else have input to that budget. So I guess my concern is if that is going to be a problem, to make sure that in your recommendation, you let us know that that's a problem, because I wouldn't want to make a motion that's going to make life miserable. And in that sense, being that it's way overtasking to accomplish that.
Thank you. Trustee Poitras?
I think that this is a great idea because I remember before I was a trustee and had any understanding of the budget at all, I would hear big $1 million numbers, or I'd hear, we have a classroom of this size and there's just no money in the budget, but then we have these nutrition programs. But what people don't understand is that there's specific money used for specific things. And so I think engaging our stakeholders and just not giving them all, the information is on our website if they want to go look it up, but giving them an overview of like, this is what we have to work with and this is what we're focused on can really help them get a better feeling for what's going on. And then if there are questions that are deeper or they're looking for more numbers, we can direct them to the website or have a conversation with them privately. But to give them that nice base so that they feel kind of like, I've heard a lot about it in the news, what's going on in our division, it can really help them feel like they have a better grasp and see what a phenomenal job we are doing in our division of being fiscally responsible and preparing ahead, and what a benefit that has been for our students and our staff.
Trustee McKee?
Okay, well, I certainly agree with you with what the trustees have said. Having a superficial budget or would certainly be beneficial. Just stressing the highlights of the budget, I think that would be an excellent way to go. The superintendent and of course I think his staff can certainly put together an excellent summary. I certainly have no problems with that. One thing I have, two more questions, and one would be, to what extent do you want to engage other stakeholders? And if you do engage the stakeholders, the problem is that you wanted to have it to be submitted for the board approval at the next regular board meeting. I am in agreement that that might be kind of a tight schedule if you want to engage the stakeholders appropriately. Okay, I will end with that.
Trustee Toon?
I thank you for raising those concerns, Trustee McKee. I think that the key for me here is that we've put it in and trusted in our administration to bring it back. Like Trustee Burdette mentioned, we want this to be feasible. We want this to be meaningful. We don't want this to be token engagement where we said, oh, we sent an email out to everybody and that covers our basis with engagement. So in trusting our administration to bring that back to us, they will let us know the scope of what they envision is feasible and meaningful, that what their recommendation is. And if we have comments or concerns or questions about that, we can do that next month. I know it's tight time frame, but when we're sitting here in the middle of February and we don't know what the funding framework's going to be, there's questions about funding for FACES outreach and high school and elementary in general. Those are so unknowns that we're in uncharted waters. We need to make sure that we're doing our diligence to get the information so we can understand it and we can understand the feedback we get from our stakeholders.
Any other questions or comments? Alrighty, all in favor? Passed. Thank you. Moving on to E6, our MOA, our Willow Creek Bus Drivers Association. It is a recommendation that the Board of Trustees ratify the memorandum of agreement between the Livingston Range School Division and the Willow Creek School Bus Drivers Association. Can I get someone to make that motion, please? Trustee Poitras? Trustee Long, did you want to elaborate, please?
Yes. We met with the Willow Creek Bus Drivers Association on Wednesday, January 22nd. And the day was very open, honest, and amiable. I'd like to say that the Bus Drivers Association has an excellent committee negotiating for them. Within one meeting, we were able to come to a memorandum of agreement. The Bus Drivers Association mentioned that the board, they were very supportive of the board and that they thought we were being very fiscally responsible. And it was obvious to all of us that the drivers are proud of their position as drivers and the service they offer to both our students and our parents. And on Friday, January 24th, the bus drivers ratified the agreement, and I recommend that we do the same and vote yes.
Any questions? Trustee Toon?
Thank you. I just want to thank our administration and our negotiation staff for the work that they do. Really appreciate our bus drivers as a product and parent of busing system in LRSD. I appreciate their valiant service, and they go above and beyond to keep our kids safe and get them to school.
Thank you, Trustee Toon, very much so appreciated. Any other questions, comments? All in favor? Passed. Moving on to E7, our Audit Committee Terms of Reference. Recommendation that the Board of Trustees approve the draft Audit Committee Terms of Reference as presented. Can I get someone to make that motion? Trustee McKee? I'll turn it over to Trustee Toon.
So starting off, this is our first meeting we had as a brand new audit committee with the changes in the Education Act. We're taking this from a standing committee of the entire whole board to a separate committee where we will have, due to the Education Act, invited public members. So in doing that, we needed to draft some terms of reference to help us in development that and to get us set up for the membership of that. So it's included in the package. The terms of reference, really appreciate the work that went into doing this. We didn't reinvent the wheel on this. We borrowed from some other jurisdictions that have previously had public members on their audit committees, and really look forward to what that's going to bring to the work that the audit committee does. Is there any questions?
Any questions? Any comments? Trustee Yegus?
First of all, is it your understanding that this is going to be the framework that is going to be put into policy on the audit committee?
Correct.
Okay. First of all, there are some grammatical problems with this in terms of, look, I'm sorry, was it a cut and paste?
Yes.
Anyhow, you covered a lot of the things here, but I was just wondering if all of this is needed within the policy, or if it could be part of an addendum to it so that the people could look at it. It's just that I think this is pretty long for it, and we should have a shortened version of it. And some of this, I'm looking at the code of conduct, and you have public members question mark, and I don't know what is meant by that. And all the things that are with that. Well, we don't have that for any of our other committees. Now, I do know that this is another committee, and maybe we have to put a separate policy on this as an audit committee, which would make more sense to me, because it is something that we don't have at this point.
So my understanding was the intent was to approve this, and this was by all means not a polished finish. It would be given over to our policy gurus who could tweak that. Really, it includes more information because it's easier that way when you're getting external members. You say this applies to you, and it's all encompassing. It can say code of conduct and refer to another policy, but if it is just a short statement and you are asking public member to sign up and they have to know our policy book inside and out, that's too arduous. We wanted something that was all encompassing, saying this is what we're asking you to do. Here's the sheet that includes all your roles and responsibilities. So that's why it's a little bit longer. I appreciate what you're saying. It probably should be a standalone, just because it is something completely different than what our board's ever done before.
Trustee Yegus?
So I'm asking the board, can we make this a standalone, as this is a committee that is unique to any other the committees that we have? Can we make it a standalone and part of, was it policy 10? I'm forgetting things now. You know, where we have well, that's the external one, and this is an external one to a degree, or just put something separate so that it doesn't include it in our other committees like it is, because I think that is going to make it difficult for people to read and look at.
Are you asking to amend the recommendation?
Yes, well, I don't know if we need to do an amendment, but I'm just asking that, to put this as a standalone policy. You know, a standalone, that it isn't included in our, whatever, how many committees we have. It's another committee, but standalone. And I can't think of right now how that could, my mind hasn't wrapped around that process yet.
So I guess if we approve this, then are you saying then take it back to the policy committee, and then the policy committee bring it forth and ask the board at that time if they would like to make this a standalone committee? Just for clarification, so we got Trustee Long and then Trustee Burdette.
Yeah, I don't think that Trustee Yegus needs to make an amendment to it because it says approve the draft audit committee. So the word draft is there. It does need to be amended. It can be changed afterwards.
Okay. Trustee Burdette?
That was actually my same comment. And that's what I think too. We're approving a draft. The policy committee is going to work with it. They're going to come back with recommendations of how it should be put into the system. We're just getting it started today.
Okay. Trustee Yegus and then trustee McKee.
By approving the draft, after we approve a draft, it becomes a policy. So what I am going to suggest, and I'll make an amendment, that we say to this, Board of Trustees approve the draft audit committee terms of reference as presented to be sent to the policy committee for,
To be reviewed.
yeah, or whatever. Yeah.
By policy committee.
Is it my turn?
Just trustee McKee and then, yeah.
Well, thank you for that comment. I certainly would agree with you on that. You talked about the length of the policy and looking at some previous policies on that. You kind of pick and choose what parts relate to what you want to have as your policy, and they were very inclusive. So I can see your point on that, that this policy is very inclusive. So if it was taken back and reviewed by the policy committee, perhaps some of that could be, I'll give it some second thought, and that's probably not a bad idea.
Mr. Perry?
So the way I read this is, I mean, it's a terms of reference, right? It's a terms of reference, not a policy. And so you'd have to add the wording that Clara talks about with regards to having the policy committee bring forward a policy, right? But right now, as it stands, this is being approved as a terms of reference. And the reason we had to do something of this nature, which is different from outside of other committees, is that we're putting out an external ad for public members, and we needed to have something to reference to so that they understood what their responsibilities are, and something that they could go and read. And so that's how it came about, I think, right, as Brad, as a terms of reference.
Yep.
And so that's just a little bit of clarification as to how this came and why we need it, so that tomorrow we can put out the ad so that the individuals that will be submitting application for that have something to read as far as their responsibilities.
Thank you. Trustee Yegus put forth an amendment that to be reviewed by policy. So we need to vote on the amendment. Okay. Amendment that the Board of Trustees approve the draft audit committee terms of reference as presented to be presented to the policy committee for review. Any questions on that first? And then, yeah, trustee Long?
Well, that's exactly it I was going to speak to. Trustee Yegus was trying to arm wrestle me, so I couldn't get in. Perhaps Trustee Yegus would accept something like this, that the Board of Trustees approve a review of the draft audit committee terms of reference as presented, and then have that brought back to another board meeting.
Are you recommending another amendment? Because we need to vote on this amendment first.
Actually, I was asking Trustee Yegus if
Okay.
she would accept the amendment worded that way.
A friendly amendment?
The board has the right to ask the policy committee to review any changes into policy. So by stating that, we know that it has to go to the policy committee. And I think we need to put that in there so we understand the process that we're doing. Do you understand what I mean?
Are you accepting Mr. Trustee Long's friendly amendment?
I don't know what it is right now. Here, talk of mine.
I got it. That the Board of Trustees approve the review of the draft Audit Committee terms of reference as presented. And the review then would be by your Policy Committee.
Trustee Yeagas, do you accept that as a friendly amendment?
Yes. Y- Yeah, as long as we understand that it's got to go to the policy committee.
Yes, she's accepted that as a friendly amendment. Do you have that, Nikki?
Yeah, let's just take the time to make sure the motion is
Yes.
correct and not feel rushed or anything, so that we all know what we're voting on.
Would you read it back, Nikki, then, as you
She
think
just,
it would be?
Can I speak to the amendment as it gets typed up?
yes, Trustee Toon. Oh,
Yeah. Review the draft. Mm-hmm. Review the draft, yeah, of the Audit Committee terms of reference. Review the draft, take a vote. Yeah. Of the Audit Committee terms of reference, of the after draft. Yep. Now, do you need, and you've got Policy Committee, yep. There you go.
Can I speak to
Trustee
that?
Toon.
Both of the presented amendments, I think, defeat the purpose of the motion. If you do that, we're not approving the audit committee terms of reference. They're still in draft, and so we need something approved so that we can advertise for our committee members. So I think I would speak to defeating both the amended motions, go back to the original motion, and anytime the board approves terms of reference, it automatically can be reviewed by the policy committee. We don't need a motion for it. There isn't a terms of reference that the board creates that the policy committee does not have the authority to review.
Thank you, Trustee Toon. Did you want to speak to the amendment? Trustee Yeagas?
I think I actually followed what Trustee Toon said.
I think
And yes, I do agree with that because I understand now that there is a time element in here, and it will have to be changed. But I'd like to then, and I'll just say that I'd like to make sure we make a motion that this does go to the policy committee so that it's understood.
So right now, we have an amended motion on the floor that we will vote on. So the amendment is that the Board of Trustees approve the review of the draft Audit Committee terms of reference as presented to be presented to the Policy Committee for review. All in favor? Defeated. And now we're back to our main motion, which is the recommendation that the Board of Trustees approve the draft Audit Committee terms of reference as presented. All in favor? Passed. Thank you. Well, it's a good conversation. Trustee Yeagas?
I'd like to make a motion that the Audit Committee terms of reference be referred to the Policy Committee for review.
Okay. Any questions or comments while Nikki types that up? Okay, as soon as she's done, then we will vote.
motion that the audit terms of reference be sent to the policy committee for review. Oops. Is that correct? Yeah, correct.
Claire? Sorry, trustee Yegus, is that the audit terms of reference be sent to the policy committee for review?
The audit committee. Isn't that what it says? The audit.
The audit committee terms of reference,
Yeah.
so if you could just put committee in
Yeah,
there.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
All in favor? Passed. All right. Moving on to discussion items. F1, our fiscal monitoring report. Mr. Perry.
Okay, Nikki, can you bring that up for me? So we've made a few changes to figure this thing out here. We've made a few changes to the way that the variance analysis report or the financial report looks. It gives more of a visual view of where the financial position of the jurisdiction is. It still breaks it out by program and by object for the overall division, and it still goes into the various departments as far as the board and system admin, transportation, plant operation and maintenance, as well as instructional. There's no different there, but this gives you a little bit of a visual if you like that in reviewing the financial information. So this is as of December 31st. I know we're into February, but given the timelines for adjustments and so forth, a decision was made back that it would be a month over or further back. So this is as of December. It's 40% of the school year and 33% of the calendar year. Overall, the operating revenues are at a 32% position, which is very close to the 33% as to where they should be. The overall expenditures are at 31%, and that's a little lower than what they would be, that we would anticipate, given the fact that we anticipate a deficit of $925,000 overall. Currently, we have a small surplus. So the numbered items are on the right side, and for the most part, we've answered any questions that you may have anticipated. Much of the reason why our operating revenues would not be quite at the 33% would be based on the invoicing going out for First Nation tuition in December, and that wouldn't have been collected until into the new year for the most part, which would have a significant impact on that, which would put us at over 33%. Expense-wise, a lot of the evergreening technology, which is expended for the most part in the summer, as well as IMR expenses, would have a declining impact on the overall percentage of expenditures. And so those are two major areas that would be one of the reasons it's not as higher than what we had anticipate. So the first part is by program, so it looks at the different programs. Is there any questions in regards to that area right now? Yes, John.
This may not totally relate, to what you're going through the revenues, but
That's okay.
is it your understanding that the upcoming budget will freeze the operating revenues at the $54,302,253? Is that what you're predicting will be frozen for the budget in the upcoming year?
The only thing that I can say with regards to the budget in the upcoming year is the overall funding that's provided from the government to Alberta to the education system is frozen. I have no idea how that impacts us or how it'll impact another jurisdiction until we find out in late February, early March, how they're allocating those dollars. There's lots of changes. It's an overall it's an overhaul to the entire funding framework, and it'll affect jurisdictions differently. So until we have that, I don't know how it will impact us specifically.
Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome. The next page is by object, so that breaks it down into salaries, benefits and allowances, service purchase, supplies, and so forth. Same overall numbers, but broken down in a different manner. And again, there's responses to why those percentages are where they're at. Again, you can see that over 70% of our expenditures, and this is why we've put the visual on there, is salaries and benefits of our employees. Services purchased would be the next highest percentage, and so forth in that area. Amortization is up to 7%. Looking into the instructional side of things, 31% revenue received, 31% expended. Again, with the responses as they are. The board and system admin, the overall expenditure budget is around 31%. It's close to the 33%. Plant operations and maintenance is around a 32% expended. And transportation, which is the one that we're all keeping our eye on, is 35% of the revenue has been received. A good portion of that is because of the instruction and transportation fees, which are not for regular bus riding, but for field trips and things of that nature, is up from the prior years, given the fact that we increased the amount of cost. We increased the costs of using the buses based on what our actual costs were from prior years, and it was no longer being subsidized to the extent that it was. And so those dollars are up. We actually went through, this is a side note outside of this report, we've gone through a very detailed review of the transportation area. We know that it's, one of our largest concerns with regards to living and within the budget. We've made significant changes from the prior year, where we went away from contracted services for busing, and we've taken on our own mechanic shop on the west side of the jurisdiction. And we believe that we are within the budget at this point in time and not in a deficit position, and we're continuing to work towards that. Yeah. And we'll keep you up to date on that as that goes on. But okay, any questions?
Any questions at all? Trustee McKee?
Yes, I'd like to thank you. I think your format is very much improved. I certainly appreciate your pie graphs that you have included in indicating what amount of expenses, what proportion it is to to the big picture. So I certainly appreciate that, and I thank you for for all that you do in preparing this report as well, or maybe I should say to you and your staff as well.
Yeah, I do very little to prepare this, so I'll pass that thanks on to my staff who put this together.
I also want to echo Trustee McKee's response to this. This was really, it's good to just look at it like a snapshot of it. It's much, I found it really easy to read. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much too. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Perry? Trustee Burdette?
Yeah, I like books with lots of pictures too.
Need to throw a comic in there too. Thank you, Mr. Perry. Now we're on to F2, our budget review process. Mr. Perry.
It just gets more and more exciting all the time.
Yep.
Let me just go and bring that one up.
they're not as colorful.
I thought as you were having your discussion on stakeholder input that this might have been good information to have available as well, but I was patient and figured we'll talk about it in a little bit. But this is the calendar that's typically brought to you just to understand the process that we go through, the timelines that we have in relation to the budget process itself. It's typically a full year process by creating, submitting and monitoring the budget. And then how that impacts the next year's budget. And so I'll just go through real quickly. I'm sure you've had an opportunity to look at the calendar itself. It has changed a little bit just based on what we know and when the information will come out from the provincial government on the budget. And so typically in January, we would have had an allocations committee meeting, and we would have had another follow-up meeting in February in anticipation that we would, of any adjustments that we would bring to the board for the allocation process. This year, it didn't make a lot of sense to do that, given we don't know how the funding's coming to us. And we have made changes to the allocation process in the past and felt that where we are right now is still the way that we would want to allocate our funds to the schools based on how we staff schools for certificated and support staff, and then a smaller amount for operational things. That could change once we know the budget and how we receive the dollars, but we anticipate that it will not. So we haven't had any meetings for those yet. We anticipate that around the 25th to the end of February or beginning of March that we'll receive the budget from the provincial government. At the same time, during the February month, we are seeking enrollment information from schools. The administrators play a big role in that. They identify what they anticipate as far as new students coming or students moving away from their schools, and they'll provide us with some numbers. Typically, they're somewhat conservative. We know going forward in the next budget that enrollment may not go up and down, or funding may not go up and down as quickly as the enrollment does. It may be a 3-year average, so it may not have as big an impact immediately on the funding that we may receive. In March, we typically bring the allocation formula to the board. This time we'll be talking about seeking stakeholder input. And then once we know the budget and have the ability to break it down and know the impact to us, then we send the allocations out at the beginning of April. And the schools typically have till the end of April, beginning of March, or May, sorry, to submit that back to us. We amalgamate the information and put it out as a board budget, taking into account department information and so forth. According to legislation, the budget submission to the provincial government, to Alberta Education, is the end of May. I'm hearing that it may be extended a little bit in this upcoming budget, but they haven't officially said that. And that would be the process. So we would submit the final budget at the end of May to the provincial government, and that would likely be the 29th of May. Again, we anticipate that there'll still be a fall update, so come September, October, once we know what the enrollment is, there'll be an updated submission of the fall update, and that ends up being taken to the board at the end of November. And then we use those numbers as far as our variance analysis. So the report that you just saw is based on the fall update budget, so that we can track versus against that. But when you get your audited financial statements, that's basically on the spring budget. But we discussed that during that time. So without going through every single item, that's generally what the budget process is. Again, we have quarterly reports built into there where the schools are required to provide their own variance analysis with explanation as to why they're higher or lower than what the percentage they would anticipate to be at that time. And they submit that to us, and we have a review of that to ensure that they have an understanding of where they're at and a good understanding of their financial situation, so we can help when we need to. And that's pretty much it. Is there any questions, Madam Chair?
I have a question. Can you see this process changing into the future because of the way the government has said that the money is what the money is? And so whether enrollment count will go up or down, it's not gonna, we won't be relying on that for funding, because the money we get is the money we're gonna get. Like, it's not gonna change over the next 3 or 4 years from what we understand as of right now. So do you see this process changing a little bit? Maybe because we don't, I don't know, I'm just.
Yep. No, without having a clear understanding of exactly what they're doing, we've anticipated a fall update, but you're exactly right. The rumors that we're hearing is that the money that they're proposing in the spring is what we will get in the fall, regardless of whether our numbers go up or down. They haven't come out and indicated that for certain, but when you talk about, stable funding, not fluctuating significantly, it's nice to know in the spring what you're going to have in the fall, and you can make those decisions and adjust appropriately if you have more kids or not. But until the end of February, beginning of March, we won't know exactly what that process looks like, but I anticipate it could change based on the way they fund us, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions? I guess not. Well, we look forward to the anticipated budget.
Yeah, there'll be lots of conversation beyond the end of
Absolutely.
February and lots of communication as well with regards to what the impact will have on us. So.
Yeah, super important. Thank you very much. Yeah. F3 are PSBAA, that the Board of Trustees will discuss the advantages and disadvantages of potentially becoming a member of the Public School Boards Association of Alberta. So sorry, I just gotta find my letter here. Okay. This letter was received in October. We had the president and second director, join us and had a conversation with us about potentially wanting us to become members of PSBAA. This was the letter that was sent out to us. It's been a while ago. I don't know if anything would have changed in it, but as the outline, I just wanted to have this discussion in an open board meeting and see what other board members felt about moving forward with or without joining PSBAA. So I'm going to open the floor to questions, comments. Trustee Toon?
Thank you. Previously, when we had this discussion a few years ago at the board table, we had a motion on the floor, and I find it just a little bit difficult to have a fulsome discussion. It's either a yes or a no if we join, and so I would ask if there's anybody entertained and willing to put a motion forward to join PSBA, because then it's easier to have a discussion. It's a yes or no answer, not I philosophize and think that there could be advantages and there could be disadvantages, but really what does that mean for Livingston Range? Are we going to join or not is what it boils down to.
So are you entertaining an idea of putting a motion forward, Mr. Toon?
I would respectfully ask if there's anybody willing to put forward a motion, because I cannot put forward a motion and speak against that same motion.
Trustee Yegas?
I'll put forward a motion then that the Livingston Range Board of Trustees become part of the Public School Board Association of Alberta.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. The recommendation is that the Board of Trustees become members of the Public School Boards Association of Alberta. Trustee Yegas, do you want to speak to that?
Trustee Yegas is getting tired here. I, I have always, I have supported the public school boards. I think this is one of the, we talk about advocacy. This is another area that we can use for advocacy. The Francophones have a association, the Catholics have an association. I think as a public school board, uh, it would be to our benefit to work with other public school boards to look at the issues that are facing public education, not only, well, in Alberta especially. I think public education is under attack right now, and we need to look at all parts of it. And I also think that this is a good advocacy role also. Not taking anything away from the ASBA, because I think a lot of the other boards that belong to both of these don't take anything away.
Any questions or comments? Trustee Long?
I like the member-driven work plan they have there. The 3 things that are listed with the dots. That's obviously important. The money, of course, is an issue. You look at it and go, oh, we could join for a year, could we not? And if we didn't think we were getting our money's worth, not join a second year? Is that?
I think that the notice it would be required to give, you'd still have to be joined for 2 years at that point in time.
Okay.
Any other questions, Trustee Poitras? Sorry.
I was unsure of what PSBAA was compared to ASBA, so I was really glad to be able to look over this information and see that ASBA is something that the government mandated and brought forward, and PSBA is different and separate and run on their own. A lot of the professional development that they do is really beneficial and was a big seller for me, but I have since realized that you can attend their different PD sessions without being a part of PSBAA. Being financially or fiscally responsible, I don't think that there's a high enough need for what PSBAA has to offer. I don't think it's diverse enough from what ASBA offers, and so at this time, I think that I would have to vote against this motion, but I would be in favor of attending some of the PD that they offer that's more specific to boards and governance.
Trustee Toon?
Thank you. I'd echo a lot of what Trustee Poitras says. I really appreciate the work that they do. I've attended their PD multiple years in a row. It's phenomenal. They bring in a lot of great speakers and a lot of good things on governance. In saying that, I think there is a lot of redundancies in services that they provide that ASBA does as well. There's been an increase in partnership with ASBA and PSBA. Morris Fritz, one of their consultants, has come over to the Alberta School Boards Association, is now working with them. And they've increased what PSBA is attendance. I do think there is good advocacy work that they do, and that's an important voice. But we can lend our voice to those things at a no cost to our jurisdiction and our students and staff. So I think that at this time, for myself, it would be a no one joining as well.
Trustee Burdette?
Yeah, I believe that I've been part of some of their PD as well, and I believe they have good PD, but I think in the fiscal climate that we are in right now, to become a member of another association that duplicates a lot of the things that we can get from ASBA, I don't think it would be in our best financial interest to be spending that money that way. And so that's why I would vote against this.
Trustee McKee?
I'm in agreement with Mr. Burdette on that. I think for like the $14,500, you can probably attend some of their sessions at a much lesser fee. So although it's for a very worthy association, I still feel in agreement with everyone else that the money right now could probably should be probably be held at a restraint, and people who want to attend some of their sessions can probably just attend that at a much cheaper rate than the $14,500.
Thank you. Anybody else have any comments? Recommendation that the trustee Yeagas put forward is that the Board of Trustees become members of PSBAA. All in favor? Declined. Thank you. All right, moving on. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, so luckily we have our presenter here with us today. We have our presentation from Mr. Chad Guzik, Associate Superintendent on Curriculum and Innovation. He will provide the board with an update.
Thank you for having me, first of all, and thank you, Mr. Perry, for attending today. I will be giving a quick presentation about where we are with regards to virtual school and dual credit, and it starts with transition and growth. You're going to see some numbers here and how we're kind of transitioning towards different alternate ways of learning, for sure. So first slide. So last year we had about 18 students attend the virtual school from 3 of our different high schools. And you'll notice that that was down from the year before as high school redesign kind of started to change the way we look at things, how they're offering schools within that. So you see the next slide. So we're down a little bit, but as you notice, we have English and social studies and mathematics. We have more that's being offered. And so the languages kind of came out of that. We're not seeing as many people going forward with languages, but our English has gone up. And offering a variety of different languages that way. Our Math 31 also stays there. What's exciting, though, what I think is exciting, is if you look at the 5 different high schools are all taking advantage of this offering from that. Now, a part of this is the enhanced learning model, and I want to make everyone aware of that we're starting to see that inside the classrooms. They're not necessarily a virtual school, in that they're offering it virtually with online resources, but it's through the teachers that are in the classroom. Math especially, I'm starting to see that. I wanted to have some numbers for you about how many students are using the enhanced learning model. Unfortunately, I don't know how to do that until tomorrow. The training takes place tomorrow to be able to determine how many of those students are moving from virtual school to an enhanced learning model with their homeroom teacher, if you will. So, or teachers that are responsible for those different classes. Starting to see in math especially, you have a -1 and -2. Traditionally, students would take that virtually or in English, but now they're within the same classroom working with a digital format that the teachers have. So the enhanced learning model, those to remember, are the online resources available to teachers. Okay, but again, on this slide, I just want to let everybody notice that all schools are participating in something online and virtually, which is excellent. Lori?
Maybe since you can't get that information until, or learn how to do it till tomorrow, just in the near future, we could just get an update on that, just so we know where we are between the two?
Yes, and I will have a presentation, I hope, coming forward with the Rockdale Diploma and Enhanced Learning Model, so I'll have more information at that time as well. So looking forward to that. So next slide. So that's our virtual school. As you can see, I better mention that we have still 13 students attending it. And Kirby Dietz has been really excellent that way with the languages. He's been able to support them, having that. And Nanton now is the one delivering Math 31 through their hub pilot that they're working on right now. So that's exciting as well. And dual credit partners, dual credit, we had a lot of conversation last day about the growth of dual credit. And I think the last board meeting, I said I'd hope to get 20 students registered. We only have 15 at this time. So I was hopeful for those 5 extra coming semester 2. We only had a few come for semester 2. These are our partners, and last year we talked about this. SATE's has some wonderful opportunities in pre-employment, especially with carpentry and electricians and so forth. Unfortunately, we had no one register. The update on that is my understanding is that the distance is a problem. getting the students to SAIT is difficult, and Nanton was the only school that could really take advantage of that. We're still a partner with them, and I'm hopeful we can find ways, especially students that may be, done with one semester left, can take advantage of this. This is an excellent course for them. But at this time, we have no registrations for next year either. So this year or next year, but we're still going to have promos going out for all of our dual credit opportunities. But more importantly, that happens closer to the spring. And so I'll know more by that time as well. Bow Valley one, that one is taken off. The bulk of my increases this year, and to remember last year I had one student take dual credit. We had a bunch of students that took advantage of this opportunity. And the reason is it's because it's online. It's online with teachers supporting them in their schools with FlexBlock. And again, high school redesign has been a very successful model to use within dual credit. And you'll see some of the offerings: business, medical, personal health and wellness, introduction to criminal justice system, software development. These are things that students do online in the time they have in class or outside of class with a teacher dedicated to them in Bow Valley, which has been really good communication back and forth. And then I have a teacher assigned to them in their schools. Yes, Lori, or sorry, Trustee Hodge.
It's okay.
Hodges.
Do you have kids registered in all of those courses?
Pretty much, and I'm going to show you
Wow.
in just a minute.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. So that's two of our partners. The other two partners, if we click on the next slide, the University of Lethbridge has been great. We've been working with them now. They're the original one. It's their second full year, but we were working with them to get it started for 3 years. And we had actually a number registered. We were full for Cinema 1000. We had 25 students, not just from us. We had probably 8 from us. Unfortunately, distance, soccer practice, sports, a lot of things got in the way because this one is happening at night from 6 to 9. So we're in discussions with the University of Lethbridge. How do we make this work? How do we make this better? The one that's interesting is bioengineering. We had one student take that, and that was on a Friday afternoon the student took it. So that might be our window of opportunity for students to be able to travel to the university and to enroll in these courses and take advantage of them. Both courses are excellent. It's our only university course offered for dual credit, but allows them to have that in, on a 4-year program. You can use that almost anywhere. They're 1,000 level courses, so allows them to give one course on us for sure. And at this time, and I say at this time, there is no fees charged to students, just their transportation there, not even their textbooks. With the grant that I received from University of Lethbridge pilot, the Alberta government, I should say, that $50,000 is used to support us moving forward in all our dual credit at this point in time. But that ends this year. Olds is a new partner. There's 4 that's on there. Most of it was hospitality and tourism. We had one student take that, but they've just got on board with those 3 other courses that are available to us. Olds looks very promising for next year, and we've had some students that actually talked to, and the horticultural courses that you see there as well. These are new offerings, and we're excited. A conversation I had at Rock the Diploma, actually, of all places, there were students wearing Olds t-shirts and stuff like that, and I said, hey, I've got something for you. So I was hopeful this semester, but maybe next year we'll get some of those kids to join up. The last one that is kind of fresh off the press, and I mentioned the last board meeting as well, that we are very close to aquaponics in Lethbridge College, but through our partnership, and I have to mention that a lot of this work is in collaboration with Zone 6 and with other school divisions, Palliser specifically, and others, and West Winds, and that we're kind of joining together for these agreements. So instead of having one school, one agreement, one division, we're doing multiple divisions in one post-secondary institution. So they actually came back, I was on Thursday, with probably 6 other offerings besides aquaponics for our kids for Lethbridge College in a blended format where it's online and then potentially being there 3 days throughout the semester for lab work, which is also exciting to see the aquaponics lab. So very hopeful with that one, but nothing is signed and nothing's done. That's the future one that we have listed there. So if we click to the final slide, these are the courses the students have taken. You see the bulk of them have been through Bow Valley, and that's across the division. And then U of L, we had a few students. In Old College, we had a few students. But most of those courses, the psych course that's inside the medical part of Bow Valley has been very popular. Anything to do with health services, I'm finding students are wanting to take those courses. So that's where our big plus. Again, I'm very excited about the bioengineering. I hope we get some more next year for that student. So it's been a learning process, but what I've noticed with dual credit is they're starting to offer something for anybody, for everyone. And that's exciting. So we're trying to keep those partnerships going and keep our collaboration going. We're going to have more conversations as in Zone 6 with all the people that are participating to see if we can do more work together and be together and do some of that heavy lifting together as we do that, and then work out a way to fund this going forward. And again, the budget will determine a lot of this, but we're seeing growth. So we went from 1 student to 20, and to kind of summarize what happened with the virtual school, we're seeing those offerings being held in class. I'm confident to say that. I won't confirm it till I see how many kids are actually using the enhanced learning model, but I'm starting to see some of that virtual world that is existing for kids inside the schools, and start leveraging some of our other tools that we have available to them. So yeah, it's exciting. It's a transition, but a growth that we're seeing in this field of alternative education. And I bored oh, good, I got some questions. Good. Trustee Long. Oh, that's not my job. Sorry.
Trustee Long?
I assume all of our communities have adult education.
Yes.
And you were saying how popular the Olds College is online. Is it possible for our students to be able to work with some of those other institutions online at wherever adult education is offered? For example, in Crow's Nest, it's at MDM. Would that be a possibility? Students go there in the evening and take these courses?
Probably, we'd like to keep them on our institutions, right? So it's Livingston Range offer a course. If they had for Lethbridge College has some satellite places that might be available to them. The online stuff, the night stuff, they require them to be there, right? They didn't want to, at this time, it's not available synchronously, like through virtual or through like VC or something like that. It's just you have to be there for those. The online ones that are here, they're anytime. They can take them anytime they want, take it at home. And we like to have it because we have a supervising teacher. It's nice to have it inside the school give them supports, because these are college and university courses. They are not easy. And especially some of these ones. And by the way, our students have done very well. I should mention that as well. I think I had one student that's having difficulties of all the students registered. And even them, we're going to get her through. So for the most part, it's been a very positive experience for our students in regards to how they're doing with the courses. But that's because there's supports in place. There's people there that can support them as best they can without knowing the content, right? And so that's kind of like we have it inside the schools at this particular point in time. And those ones the only one we have after schools is Cinema 1000 from 6 to 9.
Trustee McKee?
So you said that your grant of $50,000 is, the problem with it is that it's not going to linger probably as long as you want it. So how does the funding go for the dual credit? I mean, for years and years, it's been controversial between who gets what funding and the money goes where. Has that been settled yet? Like if someone takes a dual credit course, where does the funding go? Or do the students have to pay for the registration for a course, or how does that work?
So at this time, no one pays because of the grant that we received, and some of these are going through the actual virtual school because it's virtually online. So there's some credit funding that's still associated with that to cover that. The block funding students are able to those courses like that aren't online and they have to attend. There's a top up of block funding that's provided by Alberta Education to try to get it closer to being able to pay for that course. Going forward, though, that's something I don't have. Are we going to be charging students? Some divisions do charge students if they do not complete, because we pay whether they complete or not, because the colleges and universities have to have a teacher there. So there's deposits. There's different ways of done it. We haven't done that yet because we want to grow this as best we possibly can. I'll have to wait till the funding formula comes out to determine what we can or cannot do. And but I'm optimistic at this point.
Trustee Toon?
That kind of goes with my question. How is the uncertainty with the funding framework affecting future plans for both dual credit and a virtual school, but also the tightening of funding for post-secondary schools?
I can't speak to the post-secondary. I know I've had meetings and we've had discussions about planning for next year. And so we're planning as if we're going to be offering this, and how we pay for that. It depends again on the funding formula that comes and what happens with the university as well. So their changes have taken place. For them, for the most part, Brad, is that they get paid the course, right? We're paying them for the course. It's how we mostly fund this. How are we going to pay for this going forward? So at this time, I'm optimistic that the budget will allow for dual credit, but I can't say for sure until I see that. Right?
Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alrighty, moving on to our key messages. What would we like to see our 3 top key messages be? Trustee Poitras?
I think that we should highlight our, whoa, sorry. I think we should highlight the dual credit, what's it called,
Presentation?
program? Or our dual credit program, so discuss the presentation. I think that when we live in a rural community and sometimes you hear our kids can't get these opportunities or they don't have as many options available to them in school, this is something that we've made such an effort with, and it's expanding, and it's a way that they can get ahead and actually get college credits right during high school. And I think that that's something that we should be proud of and that our parents and our students will be excited about the more they hear about it. So I think it's very important to highlight that.
Agreed. Trustee Yegas?
The school calendar, I'm sure the principals are going to be bringing that up at our meeting, but, you know, just to show that we understand it more.
Trustee Long?
Do we want to mention the idea of the stakeholder input as far as budget?
I think so.
That's it.
That was,
No, Brad. No.
Madam Chair, I think we should include our agreement with our
Yeah.
bus drivers so we can highlight the amazing work that they do
Yeah.
and our appreciation for them.
I'm going to agree with Trustee Toon on that one. That was going to be one of mine, that we just should really highlight that, our MOA.
May I just clarify that that's Fort McLeod North? So
Right.
that's not Pitcher Creek, not Lunbrick, and not Crow's Nest Pass.
We can share that in the highlight then? Okay, yeah. Thank you. So just to go over, we'll highlight our dual credit presentation, our school calendar, our stakeholder input, and our MOA agreement. Trustee Long?
Do we want to mention that my motion was defeated?
No.
I'll mention it. It's officially-
Thank you, everyone. Now we're going to get a motion to go in camera. Trustee Burdette at 2:54. Mm-hmm. I don't need to do the motion on camera, I'll just motion to adjourn. Okay. Motion to adjourn? Can I get someone to make the motion to adjourn? Trustee Long? All in favor? 4:34, thank you.